Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for starting off Giving Tuesday here with us. My name is Sharon Capetta, and I'm the Director of Development at the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. And I have the pleasure of welcoming you on behalf of our colleagues, Sharon Closius at the Valley Community Foundation and Lisa Stanger at the Jewish Community Foundation for Greater New Haven. And I also have housekeeping duties. As you can see on the slide, if you have questions, please submit them using the Q&A feature. We are going to have a moderated portion for questions. Lisa Stanger will handle that for us. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you our good friend and colleague, Rick Peck. Rick is, I've known Rick through a number of different things. He is a master networker, but most recently as president of the Advisors in Philanthropy, which is a national multidisciplinary trade group. Rick is has been a financial advisor himself. He has multiple certifications, the financial planning, the financial consultant, and the chartered advisor in philanthropy. And he's currently an independent philanthropy consultant, does presentations like this, does development work with the Silicon Valley Community Foundation, and is deeply committed to the value proposition of charitable giving in the professions and how it helps advisors help their clients, help with planning and estate matters, and help their communities. So without further ado, Rick, I leave it to you.
Thank you very much, Sharon. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks to Carmen as well for helping to organize us and all of the institutions that are hosting this. It's appreciated. As Sharon said, I'm Rick Peck. I'm happy to be doing this presentation today because I think it's one of the most important presentations that I do. I don't see enough of these types of presentations. I don't know if anybody's ever heard the phrase, make the movie you want to see or create the song you want to hear. I kind of create the power presentation that I want to see because I hope that it resonates. So I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint right now and we'll get started. Let me just share my screen. Okay, here we go. All right. So here we have the case for offering charitable giving services. I have some facts and overview here. And again, there's my credentials. There's my phone number. If anybody ever wants to reach me, that's my cell phone number. And then my email, thephilanthropyguy@gmail.com. So here we have it. All right, so I like to start with just some trends, some marketplace challenges. This is borrowed from Stanford University program they have called PAX, and they do something called the Philanthropy Toolkit. And from the Philanthropy Toolkit, they have these facts and figures, and I thought they were quite compelling. And so I'll just start at the top there. The competition. There's 400,000 advisors out there. And I'm sure all of you know, if you're watching this today and you're thinking, where do I fit into the picture? I mean, there's a lot of competition, right? There's a lot of people who are vying for the same particular clients. In fact, a networking group that I'm part of has not allowed financial advisors to be part of the networking group because there's so many financial advisors that want to be part of this group that they literally had to lock them out temporarily for a little while. So that's how much voraciousness there is for this market. Now, commoditization, I believe, and I'm sure all of you have seen, that it's harder to differentiate services. When somebody steps forward and says, I do retirement planning, I do education planning, I work on life insurance, I help build cash reserves for people, and so on. That's that's not that different one against the other. So how are people differentiating their particular practices from others? Fee compression, I call that a race to the bottom. People are very fee averse, so they're going to walk into the situation and say, who's the cheapest financial advisor I can work with? Who's giving me the best deal? That isn't necessarily translating, as we all know, into the best service or the best potential advice. So, but that's what people are tuned into. So what are we doing to show that our fees are worth it? And otherwise, it's just going to be a competition to zero. Attrition. So we'll talk about this a little bit. An aging client base. People have clients who are in their 60s and their 70s and their 80s and their 90s, and they're aging out. So that's a problem. And there's a historic wealth transfer. We'll talk about that. Assets on the move. We hear about this a lot, but it's really just something I think people aren't really latching onto. And I'll show you some statistics that I think are staggering, really. 30 to 40 trillion dollars will transfer in the next 30 to 40 years. That's from the Wells Fargo Investment Institute. That's a lot of money, right? Trillions of dollars transferring. And then this next statistic really gets me. 90%, I've even heard 91% of estate transfers result in advisors losing assets under management. That's from June 2010. That means only 9 to 10% of the time this is the second generation or the third generation keeping their money with the advisor that their parents or their grandparents had. That's a massive transfer. So advisors are standing to lose $27 trillion if they don't find a way to create relationships. So as a firm, if you are representing a firm, what are you doing to create stickiness with your clients, build value, and differentiate yourself? What's going to make you stand out so that somebody actually wants to work with you, stay with you, recommend you? What are they going to say at a cocktail party to say, my advisor does this, this, and this? And then the other person goes, wow, that's really exciting. That's my advisor doesn't do that. That's what I'm talking about. What are you doing to really stand out? So this is something that some of you may have seen before. The U.S. Trust Study of the Philanthropic Conversation called this out some years back. So it says, according to the U.S. Trust Study of the Philanthropic Conversation, you need to be equipped to begin the conversation with your clients. I think this is a sort of a tragically comical slide. Who initiates the philanthropic conversation? Well, it depends on who you ask. So if you see on the left there, high net worth individuals were interviewed. And what did they say? Who initiates the conversation? The high net worth individual initiates the conversation. That's what 61% of the respondents said. That's what the individuals said. Did I do it? I bring up the conversation, not my advisor. But if you ask the advisor on the right side, who initiates the conversation, the advisor says, oh, of course I do, 39%. I do. I initiate the conversation. And only 6% of the time where the response is that the high net worth individual initiates the conversation. So why I say it's sort of tragically comic is that when you look at this, clearly nobody's bringing up the conversation very well. Each one thinks the other is not doing it. And, so it means that there's probably no conscious, very clear way that this conversation is being brought forth, which puts the onus back on the advisor to say, how are you doing it? Maybe you're not doing it at all. Maybe you're doing it only if the client brings it up. Maybe you're doing it, very sporadically. So just something to be very conscious of. Now, how does this affect you? The majority of high net worth individuals believe that their advisor should play an important role or a very important role in helping them with their philanthropic efforts. Again, this is from the U.S. Trust Study of the Philanthropic Conversation. Now, these statistics are a little bit older, but you can see the percent asking clients about philanthropy professional advisors, it is going up. But again, this is just in this particular study. My personal opinion is I still see a lot of advisors who are not bringing this topic up. It doesn't mean they don't value it. It's just that it's not part of their daily or weekly or monthly practice to do this in a very intentional way. Now, on the right side, percent who discuss philanthropy with advisors, high net worth consumers, again, that is going up. But again, I believe there's a lot more work to be done because I talk to, as Sharon said, she's very kind to say I'm a master networker. I do talk to a lot of people all the time. CPAs, wealth advisors, trust and estates attorneys, family wealth offices. I can't say that it's this robust program or system that all of them have. A lot of them go, yeah, that's really important. Philanthropy, yeah, we got to do that. We got to talk about that more with our clients. That's generally what I hear, or they don't really talk about it at all unless it's in a reactive way. All right, so I like this slide because it talks about the business case. So according to the Fidelity Report on Philanthropy and Advisors, firms that offer charitable planning had 6 times the median assets of those who do not offer charitable planning. So if someone who, as a friend of mine says, is only coin operated, only sees that first bullet, then they're going to say, well, geez, of course I should talk about charitable planning. We get 6 times the median assets of a firm that doesn't. Why would we not dive into this? So bullet number 2, firms that offer charitable planning had 3 times the median organic growth of those who do not offer charitable planning. And then the last one, firms that offer charitable planning had 1.3 times the median new money per investor of those who do not offer charitable planning. Again, this whole slide's about whether or not you believe in philanthropy, whether or not you think it's a good idea, whether or not you're philanthropic yourself. There's a strong business case here for at least bringing it up and incorporating it into your practice. So a little bit more from the Fidelity report. The number of donor-advised funds had grown staggering 363% from 2011 to 2019. That continues to be the case. I have a separate presentation where we're talking about the trends in donor-advised funds. It's just going up and up and up. There's 1.2 million funds out there. There's billions of dollars put into donor-advised funds. So what I like to say sometimes in presentations like this is donors are doing this with or without you. It would be nice if they did it with you. They'd probably get better advice. It would be more aligned with the other types of things they're doing financially, and they wouldn't be out there trying to do these things themselves. So the trends are the trends. The statistics are the statistics. I'm just reporting them out, and hopefully those of you who are absorbing this are saying, should I be doing things differently? Should I be thinking about things differently if we're not already incorporating philanthropy into our practice? So, and ever since the 1970s, philanthropy has steadily been on the rise. Again, all from the Fidelity report. So a little bit more, an analysis of over 1,200 registered investment advisors and family offices found that those offering charitable planning tended to have significantly greater assets, organic growth, and new money. In many cases, charitable planning is a key strategy used to deliver on a firm's objective of providing holistic wealth management. We were talking just before we went live this morning saying, holistically, thinking about all the things that are offered, why is this a gaping hole in that when people are, in the case of retirement planning, they're investing obviously, and then they're pulling money out of it later to take care of themselves in retirement. They're investing money into their kids' education, and they're pulling money out of it later. Of course, same thing here. You're investing money into the charitable component of your holistic experience in wealth, and you're taking money out of it later or now to spend it on the nonprofits so desperately need it. And in the second bullet there, charitable planning opens the door for advisors to reinforce the breadth of their wealth management expertise and build stronger client relationships and more holistic financial plans. Many of you may know that the Chartered Advisor in Philanthropy designation was built on the idea that someone who created it or funded it said, I don't think my advisor knows much about charitable planning. I'd like to create a program where people become educated about that and are able to talk be more conversant on the topic. So that's how the CAP designation was born. So, and there's now over 2,500 people with the CAP designation and growing. So a little bit more from Fidelity on philanthropy and advisors. More than 75% of entrepreneurs say charitable giving is a critical part of who they are, 75%. $68 trillion of wealth will transfer to heirs over the course of the next 25 years. That's a little different than what we saw earlier. It's obviously a bigger number than what we just saw. 3/4 of millennials identify as philanthropists, which is only which it's only 35% with baby boomers, which is interesting. 60% of executives are interested in learning how a company's stock can be used to maximize charitable giving. That has been my experience. Privately held stock, closely held stock, executives say, I don't know what my options are. I don't know what I should do. Should I take it in cash? Should I donate it? I'm not sure. How does this work? And then the last bullet there, 9 in 10 women, 9 in 10, 90%, wish they could be doing more to create positive social change, but only 14% have spoken to a financial advisor about charitable planning strategies, which kind of calls back to that other slide, which says, well, who's bringing it up? Is the client bringing it up? Is the advisor bringing it up? But only 14% say they've actually had a conversation about charitable planning strategies. A little bit more from the Fidelity report. Advisors who offer charitable planning, again, tend to have a larger wallet share, tend to have a higher proportion of clients with $1 million plus in managed assets. That makes sense, right? Because these clients are looking for tax strategies. They're looking to give money. They've got more than they need. And so they're going to likely go to an advisor who knows how to deal with higher net worth client and someone with a higher level of sophistication. So down at the bottom, clients who receive charitable planning tend to rate their advisors significantly higher on key drivers of the Net Promoter Score, otherwise known as the NPS. Again, not surprising what you'll see next. Advisors who offer charitable planning had a Net Promoter Score of 67, and advisors who don't offer charitable planning had a Net Promoter Score of 49. Having that extra tool in your toolbox improves your score. Obviously, it gives you more assets under management, all the things we just talked about. It just feels like from a business case, there's no downside. All right, I would like to pivot a little bit and talk about assets to dispose of. These are very common when people, especially high net worth individuals, are saying, I have assets, I don't know what to do with them, and quite frankly, nobody's talking to me about how to dispose of these assets. So cash. Again, I have a separate presentation that talks about people's average or the different types of assets that people have. Cash is about 7% or so of someone's total portfolio of assets. And yet you'll see a lot of nonprofits will go and ask for cash often. It's their go-to ask. But as you'll see down below there, there's lots and lots of other types of assets that people have. And again, who's talking to them about disposing of these assets? They're going to either give them to their heirs, they're going to sell them, they're going to do something with them, or they could also donate them, right? Just showing people what their options are. So highly appreciated publicly traded securities, often overlooked. Microsoft and all the stocks that everybody knows. People are holding on to these for 30 years. They're not getting rid of them. Why? Because they don't want to pay the capital gains tax. And, they just hold on to them. They don't diversify them either, right? So highly appreciated publicly traded securities, if donated, they wipe away any capital gains tax that they would have to pay, and they get to use that money immediately toward their favorite causes. Highly appreciated, closely held, privately held stock. Again, I mentioned that earlier with business owners at the Silicon Valley Community Foundation is a very common asset that's brought forth for consideration. People don't know what to do with that stock. Highly appreciated real estate. Believe it or not, of all the asset types that people have, real estate is number 2. It's only almost 40% of people's total assets is in real estate in various forms. And yet only 2% of the time is real estate donated in the form of real estate. So 40% of people's assets are in real estate, but only 2% comes in the form of real estate. It can be very powerful. I just worked on one in the past few weeks, $1.2 million piece of residential real estate donated to a nonprofit who is probably going into a $5 million campaign. So it's over 20% of their campaign is accounted for with only one gift from one couple. Isn't that amazing? Because this couple, they had made money on a business and they said, you know what, we have so much money at this point, we're very fortunate, and we can afford to give this real estate away. So it's amazing. Tangible personal property, that's antiques, collectibles, sports memorabilia, cars, jewelry, anything like that. Anything you can touch, tangible personal property fits that category. Again, very overlooked. People have things under the bed, in the basement, in the attic. They don't know what they're worth. It's good to get those things appraised just to find out maybe it's worth more than you think. It could be worth $500. It could be worth $500,000. But it's nice to be able to donate that if possible. Retirement plans. Of all the types of assets people have, retirement plans are the number 1 asset type, not surprisingly. Retirement plans, followed by real estate, followed by stocks and bonds or mutual funds outside of one's retirement portfolio. So those are the 3 largest asset classes that people have. And again, not commonly discussed, but with retirement plans, there's something called qualified charitable distributions. So when someone is 70 and a half or more, they can take money out of the retirement plan up to $100,000 per year and donate that directly to charity without it affecting their taxable income. And if they're 73 years old and they have to take required minimum distributions and they don't want those required minimum distributions from their IRA or their they don't want to pay the taxes on them, then what they'll do is they can take the QCDs, they can take those RMDs in the form of QCDs and send the qualified charitable distributions over to their favorite nonprofits and never actually take the required minimum distributions in themselves. Life insurance, old policies. I think of like a policy that's $25,000 death benefit with $24,000 of cash value. That's a classic paid up policy that nobody really knows what to do with. They'd just be okay with donating that if they could. They just don't know that that's an option for them. Or obviously leaving the death benefit to charity, or maybe they leave the death benefit to their heirs on the life insurance policy, and they leave the death benefit or retirement plan to charity because that's more tax efficient. So again, you can see these are just, I'm just scratching the surface on a lot of the things you can talk about just on the topic of assets. Royalties, this is where people have a patent or they have some sort of a copyright on something and they're receiving income pretty regularly and they don't need the income. They divert some of the income to charity. And then cryptocurrency. It's been obviously very volatile in recent years, but cryptocurrency is another asset. And some people have still made a lot of money on cryptocurrency and they're looking to dispose of it. And if the nonprofit isn't raising its hand and saying, we take crypto, that person is going to bypass them and find a different nonprofit to receive. And again, not surprisingly, back to Silicon Valley, they've taken in lots of gifts of cryptocurrency over the years, and they actually are in conversations about one right now. But again, just naming that as another type of asset that people are trying to do something with, and charitable giving, of course, is a terrific option to consider. All right, donor advised funds. Just want to move through those. Again, I said I had a separate presentation, but I do want to name that here. Some of the highlights just to compel you, if you're not convinced already, that the topic of donor advised funds is very popular and something that a lot of advisors should be conversant about. So these are from the 2021 National Philanthropic Trust Report. That's obviously updated each year. And I'm going to keep updating those figures as I go, but these figures just from the recent report are pretty compelling. So here we go. Contributions to donor advised funds accounts totaled $47.85 billion, which was a 20% increase from the year prior. So what you'll see here in this report is it's 2020 numbers, and then they're comparing it to 2019. So what you'll see here is 2020 numbers, and then again, we'll get some more recent numbers in here. All contributions are irrevocable and destined for qualified charities. So almost $50 billion. This is what I mentioned before. Number of DAF accounts in the US totaled $1 million, which is a 16% increase compared to 864,000 in 2019. That number is now $1.2 million. 1.2 million DAF accounts. So in 2020, it was the first year the number of DAF accounts exceeded 1 million. So you just heard what I said, a 20% increase even since this number was published. So they're easy to manage, flexible, and there's low contribution amounts. So Fidelity, for example, used to have a $5,000 minimum. Now the minimum is $0. So for those of you who don't know what a DAF is, I'll just pause here. You put money into one container. So if you're writing 15 checks to 15 different nonprofits, the donor advised fund allows you to write one check, put it into the donor advised fund. Then you make grant recommendations from the donor advised fund to the nonprofits that you would like to make grants to. So it's sort of like one-stop shopping. You just place the order with your donor advised fund sponsor, and the donor advised fund sponsor then does all the work and distributes the money. In the meantime, the donor advised fund is invested. So all the assets I just showed you, all the different types of non-cash assets especially, could be donated, put into a donor advised fund, liquidated, and then diversified into a nice investment portfolio. And then that's invested as the years go on. And then again, the grant recommendations come out of it. So it's super convenient. Some call it the philanthropic checkbook, but it's very popular for people who are very charitably inclined, and again, are looking to take assets that are of all different stripes and put them into one place. All right, so average DAF account size was 159,000, which is a 5.5% decrease compared to 168,000 in 2019. because DAFs become more mainstream, the number of DAF accounts increase and the average fund size decreases. So value of grants from DAF accounts to qualified charities totaled $34.67 billion in 2020, and that's a 27% increase from $27 billion in 2019. That was the highest grant-making increase in a decade. In the first year, grant-making had exceeded $30 billion. So big money here, as you can see, lots of money. These are not small dollars. So this is a key slide. I want to call this out because donor advised funds get a lot of criticism because there's no required minimum to pay out of donor advised funds. However, the grant payout rate, which is the percentage of total charitable assets at the end of the year that a charitable sponsored grants from the DAF to qualified charities, the grant payout rate increased to 23.8% from 22% in 2019. This is a key fact right here. The DAF grant payout rate has exceeded 20% for every year on record, demonstrating that DAF donors are a consistent, sustainable resource for charitable support. There's a lot of criticism to say, well, DAFs should have a 5% minimum payout. Well, they're already paying more than 20% every single year on the whole. That's pretty good. In contrast, private foundations have a 5% minimum payout requirement each and every year, and that payout's only around, on average, 6 or 7%. So think about the psychology of that. If I'm told that I can only pay, or I only need to pay 5%, then I'm going to shoot for 5%. I'm going to at least try to at least pay out 5%. The irony here with DAFs is because there is no target, people just pay out whatever they want to pay out. Some of them pay out 100% of their DAFs, and some of them pay 0, but on average, it's 20%. And I think that's a pretty impressive number. All right, so these are just some things that you could talk about if you're stuck. You're like, okay, Rick, I'm sold. I know we should talk about charitable giving. I'm just not really sure how we package this. So you could do it this way. You could say, we're going to offer this, or we're going to outsource this as a service. So strategic customized family philanthropy. You could put that up on a slide, or you could put that up in your offerings, in your sales piece. Grant making, sourcing impactful nonprofits. That's a very important topic for a lot of people. They're giving money away, but they don't know exactly if they're giving the right amount of money away, if they're doing it impactfully, if they're as well educated about the different opportunities ahead of them. They just don't know. They're too busy. It's not in their wheelhouse. So the topics I mentioned here, which you'll see very much so in the community foundation world, they're very conversant on the things you'll see right here. Food scarcity, homelessness, veterans, animal welfare, environment, racial and social justice, early childhood education, workforce development, behavioral health. It's just some of the things that a community foundation can do to help you out. And so if you need to outsource it, a community foundation is a great place to go. If you want to do that yourselves in-house, good for you, but I think you'd find that it's a much lighter lift if you just lean on some partners. But you don't have to advertise it that way. I mean, you could say we work with these local community foundations to help us, or you can just name the fact that you offer it as a service, and then just mention it later when you're talking to the client. Say, these are the different institutions we work with on these topics about sourcing impactful nonprofits. Legacy building with individuals and families. What are they trying to accomplish? What do they want their legacy to be as a family? Maybe they're well known in the community for all kinds of different things, but they're not well known, for their charitable giving. So what can they do to be impactful in that way? Being sensitive to what the community needs versus just stepping forward as a family and saying, we're going to do this, we're going to build this building, or we're going to do, and it may be very tone deaf to what the community is looking for. So again, leaning on community foundations and other outside resources is helpful. I mentioned non-cash asset disposal. People are going to dispose of these assets one way or another. It's nice for them to know what their options are, and especially presenting them in a non-threatening kind of open conversation type of way. People really appreciate that because it's not a topic they really have. They don't really lean into that. Nobody's really talking to them about that. Life income plans can be a nice door opener. I'm actually right today going to be delivering a life income plan illustration to a high net worth client or a potential client who's interested in charitable remainder trust. So the idea here is, if you're not familiar with life income plans, This is where someone takes an asset, cash or non-cash, donates it into a life income plan like a charitable remainder trust, gets a tax deduction, not for the full amount that they're putting into the CRT, for example, or the CGA, a charitable gift annuity. They're not getting a full tax deduction if they're putting in, say, 500,000, or maybe they're getting $220,000 as a tax deduction. The reason for that is because a lot of that money is now coming back to them in the form of income, a quarterly stream of income from the CRT or a quarterly stream of income from the charitable gift annuity. And then when that gift annuity or the trust terminates, the remainder goes to the nonprofits of choice. So it could be with a CRT, it could be a 10-year term, and then the trust terminates and the money goes to the nonprofits, or in the case of a CGA, it'll last to, through the lifetime of two individuals, husband and wife, and then, for example, and then the remainder goes to charities. So life income plans. I've given a talk about how life income plans are illustrated through software like PG Calc and Crescendo. It's fascinating to people. They've never seen anything like that before. They don't know how these things work, and they're much more likely to recommend them to their clients, or at least recommend the concept to them after they've seen an illustration or two. And then the last thing here, charitable lead trusts. This is the opposite of what I just described, CRTs and CGAs, where an individual receives a stream of income for life, and then at death, the remainder goes to charity. With the case of lead trusts, actually, someone would put in, say, $10 million into a lead trust, and it's paying out, let's just say, 5%. So $500,000 a year is going to many different nonprofits each and every year, annually, for example. And then at the end of the trust term, the money can either go back to the individual who donated it, or they could actually take it out of their state permanently and leave it to their heirs. CLTs, charitable lead trusts, so underutilized. I don't even understand how they're not part of the conversation all the time when people's estates are higher than $22-23 million. CLTs should always be part of a conversation if people are charitably inclined. CLTs also should have been a lot more popular when interest rates were really low, but they weren't. And I don't understand. And the only thing I can chalk it up to is that advisors just aren't comfortable talking about these things, and therefore they don't bring them up to the clients, and the clients don't learn about them, and the clients don't implement them. Whether they're charitable lead trusts in life or testamentary lead trusts at death, they're just not discussed enough. So it's a puzzle to me. So I'll end with this. What are you waiting for? Add charitable giving services to your company offerings now. So hopefully this is compelling to you. And at this point, I think what I want to do is just kind of open it up for questions and maybe talk about some real-time problems that maybe all of you are seeing, and just kind of talk through those without judgment on my part. Truly, I really want to see what kind of pain points you have and see how I may be able to help you. So I'll just stop sharing right now and just kind of open it up for questions in the chat or live if you'd like to ask a question.
So I'm going to, hi, I'm Lisa Stanger. I'm Executive Director of the Jewish Foundation of Greater New Haven, and thank you on behalf of the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven and the Valley Community Foundation. So some questions that came through that I'm going to help facilitate. Qualified charitable distributions, right now you cannot make them to a donor advised fund. First of all, a lot of actually professional advisors don't realize that, because I know we get questions all the time from people being sent from professional advisors looking to do a donor advised fund with a QCD, and we inform them that they can't, though it's a great opportunity to do another type of fund. Do you think that's going to change in the future? Do you think there's just too much negative feelings in certain parts of Congress about donor advised funds that's going to prevent that? What do you see as the future for QCDs in terms of donor advised funds, or any other expansion of the QCD?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, I would answer it like this. Everything is an evolution. We'll just go back to QCDs. I think it was around, they used to be called charitable IRA rollovers. And back, I remember in 2006, 2007 is when the discussion first started happening. People were offered the opportunity to do the charitable IRA rollovers, again, now called QCDs, but it was very much on a term basis. So people would, have that opportunity, and then it would sunset. And then the next year it wasn't in place. And then usually by December 20th, Congress would say, oh, yes, let's offer that again and make it retroactive to the first of this past year. So that was happening, and it made things very topsy-turvy. Nonprofits were very, it was very troublesome because in the last 11 days of the year, they're trying to market QCDs as an option when people are distracted by end of the year holiday festivities. So I would say now, it's permanent, and that's no small thing, right? That it was made permanent. But the other thing I'll just mention on the topic of what do I think, what was made permanent also, at least for now, is the idea of taking a qualified charitable distribution and using it to set up a charitable remainder trust or a charitable gift annuity with $50,000 as a one-time. So that's an evolution, right? It changed. As far as your question, do I think it's going to change as far as QCDs going into donor advised funds? I'm not sure. I mean, they're not allowed in supporting organizations. You can't make a QCD distribution to a private foundation, but maybe over time you can. So everything I feel like with Congress is baby steps. And back to your point about the bad press that DAFs get, it could be that they do hold off on that and say, donor advised funds still aren't paying out enough. So we're not going to exacerbate the problem by having more money go in through QCDs, only to have it not go out in the form of grant making to nonprofits. So I'd say that all we can hope for is to keep spreading the word, the good news about donor advised funds and how they are part of the solution and not part of the problem. And then hopefully QCDs would then follow with, okay, we'll let you do $10,000 of your QCD into a donor advised funds, or maybe $50,000, or maybe 100. So like I said, everything feels very incremental and very sort of evolutionary.
Thank you. Another question that came through, if you have a client who is trying to decide between sending appreciated stock to a charity or a qualified charitable distribution, which do you think makes more sense financially for them to do?
I would say that's a question for the CPA, and I would say it's really about how much they're trying to donate and also what the tax implications would be, right? I mean, if it's it depends on what they're trying to accomplish. I want to back up and say that. Sometimes we go right in and say, what's better is from a tax standpoint, X, but they may say, well, I'm trying to move money out of my retirement plan because that's where most of my money is. So maybe the QCD is the better option, or maybe they have a boatload of money in appreciated securities outside of their IRA, and they know they're going to pay a lot of capital gains on it, and they know it's only going to get worse. So maybe that's the more immediate press. So I'd say the CPA would then help to say, maybe you do a little bit of both now. You do QCDs and appreciated security donations, and then next year we look at it again, because who knows what the situation is going to be. Also, one last thing, privately held stock sometimes has certain stipulations and limitations. So maybe that's the more immediate conversation, because they say, if I don't do this by this date, something will change. So maybe I need to just figure out how to dispose of this privately held stock sooner rather than later, or whatever the case may be. So I'd say it's basically like, know all the facts about timelines, know all the facts about asset size, know all the facts you can about their tax situation, and then kind of weigh the pros and cons of each. But they don't have to be one or the other. It could be both. It's just a matter of what's best for the client.
Yeah, and just to emphasize that last point, that it could be both. And we do have some donors who are philanthropically inclined who could do both, and we've advised them, appreciate stock into the donor advised fund and qualified charitable distribution for some other large gifts, restricted endowments, capital gifts. Can you expand a little bit when you were talking about the working with clients on philanthropic planning, on charitable giving, how that might be a way to enhance your relationship with the next generation and therefore keep the client? Because I know for a lot of advisors, that's a concern about losing the next generation when their initial clients do pass.
Yeah. Well, I'd say that, stepping back a little bit, ask yourself, aside from philanthropic planning, I think the question that the advisor wants to ask is, what am I doing at all to engage the next generation? And usually it's absolutely nothing. And then they're surprised when that second generation or third generation leaves. So I would say, just think about general engagement. For example, I've seen what I think is a brilliant, simple strategy, again, aside from philanthropic planning, of advisors having a client appreciation night we're gonna have a magic show, or we're gonna go out to see a performer, or we're going to have just a nice dinner, or we're gonna have a wine tasting, just a client appreciation night, or we're gonna go on a cruise, like a boat, just like a night cruise, and they bring the clients, and then the clients get to bring a friend. That's a great way to just say, bring your family, bring everybody in, and get to meet the advisors, just, on a fun note, not even on a dry financial planning note.
Right.
But if you're gonna another opportunity that we found very successful is there's a group called 2164, which I didn't mention today. 2164 philanthropy. They have all these tools, these things. For example, one that's very powerful and effective is called Picture Your Legacy. It's a deck of cards. It's about $30, and if you bought a whole set, and you brought the family in, and you said, everyone take out their deck of cards, they're all picture cards, and just pull out 3 or 4 that you that mean something to you, that resonate with you at some level. And then you go around the table and everybody describes why they pulled those picture cards out. And it's very insightful and quite powerful. It's kind of a super simple exercise, but you hear from all these different people say, like, this is what this means to me, and this is why this is powerful to me. And husbands learn from wives, wives learn from husbands, kids learn about their parents, parents learn about the kids. And it's a nice little bonding exercise. And there's no agenda to it. You're just saying, what's important to you. You may add another layer onto it and say, if you had $1 million to give away of these 4 cards that you have, how would you spread that out, or how would you make the impact that you're trying to make? And again, you just open it up for conversation. And then I mentioned earlier the philanthropy toolkit. That's another opportunity for people to learn about ways they can engage those generations. But it sometimes just comes down to listening about what's important to them. And just by having those opportunities, whether it's the fun client appreciation events that I mentioned, or the exercises that you're doing with families to deepen the relationship and learn more, that's super powerful. And that's probably more than most people are even trying to do. There's just this magical thinking that someday when my clients pass away, that the kids are absolutely going to start working with me. And it's like, your kids, that you had literally probably dozens of years to engage them in some way, and you didn't do it. So it shouldn't be a surprise to you that they leave. So those are, I think, some basic and intentional ways to engage, and really listen, with no agenda, just really listening to what they're trying to accomplish, and you never know where that's going to go.
Yeah, listening to you speak, it actually strikes me as that's exactly the type of stewarding and intentional relationships we at the community foundations build with the donors and our community organizations and our professional advisors. And it's really the same type of thing for the same reasons, because you want people to feel appreciated, you do appreciate them, and you want to help them on their journey and help them to feel good and make an impact. Thank you.
Yeah, and one other thing I'll mention, Lisa, is I've seen this happen too, where the grandfather or the father or the grandmother or the mother give a certain amount of money to the kids, and they say, this is your money to distribute charitably however you like. We are not going to mandate any sort of agenda for you. And then the kids are like, oh, that's great. Gee, I don't know what to do. I'm not really sure what my options are. Or they do have a clear idea of what they want to do, but they don't know exactly how to do it. So in that way, you're sort of empowering the kids and the grandkids to say, this is your money to distribute. And, we can have somebody on the financial advisory team or a CPA or whoever they're being engaged with to either have that conversation with them or to help outsource it to community foundations and such helpers like yourself to be able to help them move forward. That seems, you might say, listening today, people might say, well, that's a pretty basic thing, like give money away, like that's a big exercise for kids and grandkids. Actually, it is. They don't really know. And the other thing that's super positive is when you go back and you tell the grandparents or the parents, you say, Sally or Johnny, he loved this exercise, or she loved this exercise. It was really fun. They learned a lot, and they can't wait to do it again. That really warms the heart of the grandparents and the parents, not because they told the kids how to, or the grandkids how to disperse the money. They just gave them the discretion to do it. But just the act of that sort of positive feedback loop. Grandparents, parents give the money, kids give it away, grandkids give it away, come back, tell the grandparents, parents what they did. And then that feeds that positive cycle. And therefore you're giving them the proper training wheels to be able to do this when the parents and grandparents aren't there anymore. They've already been able to practice the act of giving by working with professionals who can help guide them through it.
Great. Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions? All right, thank you. Sharon, do you want to come back on? Getting there. Hi.
I cannot come back on camera
Okay.
for some strange technological reason, but very grateful for this presentation and the conversation. I think it's wonderful.
That's great. Sharon, could I add one more thing, just some trends, maybe since we have a little extra time, some trends that I've seen in my practice as an independent philanthropy advisor. I've been doing it now for 6 months, and these are other door openers, just some added bonuses, I guess, is a lot of the work that I'm seeing is with nonprofits who are trying to either raise money for the first time, so they've never had a fundraising program at all. A lot of these nonprofits, even larger ones, surprisingly, have never received revenue from in the form of charitable donations. Or they have a charitable giving program and they're just trying to take it to the next level. And to reinforce what I said earlier, non-cash assets are an absolute blind spot for a lot of these nonprofits. So I mentioned that because if you as advisors yourselves are on boards, you can do a lot worse than saying, hey, introduce them to professionals who can help them build out their charitable giving program. And that's so much of what I do, is just helping coach nonprofits. The second thing is, as we've been talking about, the donors who are looking for help, one thing I've seen is private foundations, people who are setting up private foundations, they're kind of there's a dual nature to what they're doing. They're trying to raise money for their private foundation, and they're obviously trying to deploy money from the private foundation. So they're on kind of a publicity campaign to let people know about their private foundation. But then at the end of the day, a lot of them are sort of like, I still don't really know if what my private foundation is doing is beneficial. And then the third area that I had mentioned that we're doing today as well is talking about education around having the philanthropic conversation. I've had the fortune of being on some platforms like CPA Academy or My CPE, where people are getting CE credits. And there's a big void actually on the topic of charitable giving. There's a few things on like charitable remainder trusts, or once in a while you'll see something. But generally speaking, I felt like I had carte blanche, where they just said, well, what do you have for charitable giving topics? And I was like, well, I have 16 different things I could give you. And they go, great, bring it on, because we have nobody talking about this stuff. So I go on these platforms and I just try to be able to spread the good word like we're trying to do today. And there's a lot of people who show up. Recently, 1,200 people signed up for a course that I was doing on the Secure Act. The Secure Act, I called it Secure Act 2.0 and charitable giving opportunities. 1,200 people signed up, 1,000 people showed up live. So, and obviously they're there to get their CE credits, but just the fact that they signed up on that topic showed me that it was pretty hot. And so I say that to all of you because those who are listening, there's all these entry points. If clients are working for a nonprofit, or they're on a board, or they volunteer, or they are advisors, I mean, there's no shortage of things that we could be talking about to kind of educate them and have them be more conversant. Because again, I don't think that there's a lot of people who feel like, yeah, I've got it all. I understand everything. All the charitable giving topics, I got that 100%. It's not true. The most of the time they don't know it, and sometimes they don't know where to go for it. So again, days like this is where we can step up and hopefully try to shake the tree a little bit and try to find out other ways that we can go in and talk to audiences who would be receptive to this information and take action on it. It looked like there was another question that came up. Oh,
sorry, we got another question that just came in. It says, can you talk about how to work with other advisors? It says, who is part of the charitable planning process?
I think the question being asked here is more about being a quarterback, is kind of the way I'm reading that. So there is a book called, and Sharon knows this too, it's because she's a chartered advisor in philanthropy. Are you as well, Lisa?
I am not, no.
Okay, all right. So Chartered Advisor Philanthropy, one of the books is called The Right Side of the Table. And the right side of the table is basically saying, how can you be the most trusted advisor in the room? And to be the one that basically leads a conversation. So I think the spirit of the question that was asked just now is, how can you work with these other advisors? You basically start with what is the client trying to accomplish? And then you bring the other advisors together around that topic. And especially for high net worth clients, you can imagine that the CPAs will probably respond to your phone call or your email. And so will the wealth advisors, and so will, the trust and estates attorneys. So I would say the team is trust and estates attorney, CPA, wealth advisor, family wealth office, charitable giving specialist, and obviously client. And that's kind of the core team. There's also high-end insurance professionals that can be part of the conversation. I mentioned tangible personal property. There's those individuals who can be part of the conversation, who can help dispose of tangible assets. There are specialists in cryptocurrency. These are all more on the periphery. I'm not sure they necessarily have to be part of that central conversation, but real estate experts on the topic of donating. So I'd say, but the core team goes back to CPA, wealth advisor, trust and estates attorney, philanthropy specialist, family wealth office, client. And again, coming to the table with the problem set that needs to be solved, and the others will show up and show what they have. What I find to be very interesting, sometimes we call those a mastermind. When you're bringing that forward, you really sort of separate the wheat from the chaff, if you know what I mean. Like, you'll see a CPA step forward and go, yeah, I really understand what you're talking about, Sharon or Lisa, and here's what I can add to the conversation. Or the advisor shows up and says absolutely nothing. When the advisor says absolutely nothing, it just shows me that they're really learning and they don't have a lot to bring to the conversation. So you can do two things with that. You can either spend a little extra time with that person who is a little too quiet, or you can say, it's a little delicate, but you could almost say, depending on how trusted you are, you could say, I'm not sure if this person should be part of the team. They're not really adding a lot to this conversation. I'm not sure. Maybe their wealth has grown to a level that advisor has been, it's just out of their wheelhouse at this point. They need a different team, a different sophisticated team. I mean, I say that very delicately because I know there's relationships that people have with their advisors and CPAs for a long, long time. But that is a reality, that sometimes that advisor they've had for 30 years is no longer their best advisor when it comes to certain topics. And that it just should be stated sort of broadly that should be something we should all be aware of. But again, I think the spirit of what was asked here is, how do you gather them together? You gather them together around the topic of how to solve the client's problem. And then those who really care about solving the problem in a sophisticated way will show up, and hopefully you'll have a really good generative conversation.
And that book you referred to, is that The Right Side of the Table by Scott and Todd Fithian?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yep.
Great.
Yep. It's a pretty powerful message. It just it's like something I think we all crave, is how to become that most trusted advisor, so that the other advisors go, I'd be stupid not to show up when Lisa is gathering the meeting or Sharon's gathering. Like, Sharon has this client's ear. So if I'm bright, I'll show up and listen and be part of this conversation, because they seem to be the one that is closest to this particular donor at this time, or this client at this time. So yeah. Good. Yeah, you're welcome.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Rick and Lisa, and appreciate you starting off this morning. I don't know if our guests and you are like me, but my inbox is pinging wildly with Giving Tuesday appeals. So it was kind of fitting to have this conversation today. And I would encourage, Rick, you did provide your contact information. So if folks have questions and want to have a deeper conversation with any of us, I encourage that. And we will be sending out the presentation and the contact information to all the recipients or all the participants. So thank you very much, everyone. Any final comments?
None. Thank you for your good work every day,
Thank
Sharon.
you.
Thank you, Lisa, for everything that you do. Carmen as well, doing the good work. Very much appreciated. I'm happy to call you friends, and we'll get out there and make Giving Tuesday the best we can make it, right?
Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Bye.
So long.